welcome to another episode of myself talking about Warcry. This time we are taking a look again at my tier list. Um, Thanks a lot for all the review and feedback I got from you guys. People were talking about how important they felt it was that I took range into account and that I talked about flight as well, flying fighters. So those two things I did do, and also I added the Iron Golems who I missed previously. They are in here now. So this is a re-upload basically. If you haven't seen the first video, don't worry. I'm going to go over all the things again. I might even delete the old one. Anyways, so what I did here is for each faction in Warcry, I compiled a good, strong warband, which was being used in tournaments. I asked people who played these warbands to give me their best lists. Some of them I've played myself and used them in tournaments and so on. So I used those lists, compared them with my numbers, which I use normally, like the average damage and such that I calculate, made sure I had the best fighters available in those warbands. And then from that, I went for averages. So, for example, the average fighter in the Skaven warband has a damage point per point value of 0.047, and so on. You don't really need to see all the numbers, it doesn't matter too much. I then made an average out of all of these numbers, so I could weigh them. So this is what all of the warbands, on average, this is the amount of damage per point value you can expect out of a warband. And then I just weighted them, so I divided this number by the one on the bottom, the average. Anyways, so these numbers now I added together. So for each value here, we've got damage, survivability, movement, model count, so how many fighters there are in the warband, average range, so how far the average fighter can shoot in the warband, and flight, so how many out of the warband's fighters have flying. So for example, for Nighthaunt, this is a 1 because all of them, 7 out of 7 fighters have flight, so if you divide 7 by 7, it's a 1. And equally for other warbands, you will have less flyers. For example, in this one you have 1 out of 8 fighters can fly, so that's 0.025, and so on. So this is flight. Then I added them together, but I didn't just add them, but I gave them a weighting too. So I said, originally, in my first one, I said damage, survivability, movement, and model count are all equally important. I weighted them all the same. Now that I've added range and flying, I figured I had to really add some better weighting to these things. For flying, I added a 1%. Now some of you might think that's very low, but that's because how the maths work. Believe me, trust me, it's fair. I'm not undervaluing flight at all here. You can see the Nighthaunt, for example, they were in the very bottom when I didn't have flight added. Now they jumped up a lot of spaces, so I'm not undervaluing flight by giving it 1%. Equally, I put ranged in there. I didn't weight that as strongly as some of the other things because it's not worth that much, and yeah, again, it works out with the maths a lot better. But as you can see, for example, the Caradron, who used to be bottom tier before, are now a lot higher up in the roster. And overall, looking at the entire tier list, I feel like this is now a very fair representation for most warbands. I don't think any warband gets underrepresented here by this weighting. So let's get to the meat of it. Who are the best warbands? Who are the worst? Skaven is the best, and by a good margin. There's basically 5 warbands that are very high up there. and that 1.1, almost 1.1 range for Idle Deepkin there. So you can see Skaven, Seraphon are really good. Seraphon jumped up a lot because they have a lot of ranged fighters in this list. Then we've got Stormcast Vanguard because they have the Gryph-hounds and the birds, very quick there. Splintered Fang, just good damage overall. Idle Deepkin, now that I've taken flying and ranged into account, their eels and archers obviously do a lot better, so they also jumped up here. We've got Nurgle Demons, Legions of Nagash, good damage output there. Beasts of Chaos, Daughters of Cain, Caradron Overlords, Sylvaneth. So in general, you can see that now that flight has been added as a factor, in the top 10 warbands, there's only one of the Chaos original warbands. So they have suffered a bit from this because most of the Chaos warbands don't use ranged and most of them don't fly. So they've suffered a bit. Splintered Fang's just very good, so they are still up there. But other than that, Corvus Cabal is in 13th. I would expect, yeah, there's Bio Tyrants there and Cypher Lords. So still in the medium range, but just not as far high on top anymore. The bottom here are Ironjaw, Stormcast, the Mage's Chamber, Nurgle Mortal, Stormcast Warrior Chamber. All of these are very slow. They are mainly focused on survivability rather than damage output. And I valued survivability at 20% now, not at 25, just as it used to be anymore, because I don't feel survivability is as much of an issue in Warcry. Many games are only played over 3 or 4 battle rounds, so survivability isn't as important as having a good damage output to burst down key opponent fighters, and good movement and mobility to be able to get to objectives and so on. So I feel like it's fair to put survivability at 20% weighting, and that has really cost these slow, low mobility, durable factions whose damage output isn't great a lot. So yeah, those are at the bottom tier right now, but personally I feel like that is fair. In most games I've played, they tend to lose more often than they win, so I think that's not unfair at all. Also, I just want to add that this is all still very close, so there's a pretty minor difference even between Skaven and Ironjaws. It's like a 0.3 difference, so it's not like Skaven are double the score that Ironjaws are or something. So even Ironjaws can definitely beat Skaven in a one-on-one matchup, depending whether the victory conditions are good and so on. But just in general, you need to expect Skaven to win. They are the better warband than Ironjaws are, and I can say quite confidently that this is a fair representation. The way this list is set up is pretty fair. Still, please do let me know what you think about it. If I should have done something different, do let me know if you think this is a bit of a more fair view of all the fighters. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys.